Canada. It ranks number 16 out of 180 on the Press Freedom Index. Canada illustrated its growing commitment to the international press protections this year when it launched alongside the United Kingdom the Media Freedom Coalition in July of 2019, creating an international alliance between nations that pledge to champion and defend press freedom. In recent years, the Canadian government has shown a similar leadership domestically, as illustrated when the new federal Shield law was first tested in September of 2019. With a Supreme Court ruling that Radio Canada reporter Marie-Maude Denis would not have to reveal her confidential sources in a political corruption case she had reported on. However, the reporter's source relationships were threatened months before when a Vice National Security reporter's years-long battle ended with the Ontario Superior Court ruled that he must hand over his private communications with a publicly named source to the federal police, and Vice was forced to comply. And while the federal police continued to block media access to environmental protests on Indigenous territories, a March 2019 landmark court decision affirmed that special considerations apply to journalists covering these type of events. I would now like to read you the ruling from Madame Marie's court ruling. This was on ipolitics.canada.ca, written by Kevin Dougherty, and published September 17, 2019. The Supreme Court rules journalist does not have to reveal sources. In an 8-1 ruling, the Supreme Court of Canada ruled on Friday that Radio Canada's journalist Marie-Maude Denis does not have to reveal the names of sources she used in reports contested at a trial of a former Quebec politician. But in doing so, the High Court sent the issue back to the Quebec court, noting that the prosecutor in the case had advised the Supreme Court that a parallel investigation in Quebec into media leaks could cast a new light on the identity of the sources. Returning the issue to the court of first instance pending the end of the investigation leaks to the media is necessary to ensure the rights of the parties are safeguarded, wrote Chief Justice Richard Wagner, adding that the outcome of the investigation could render the testimony of Denis unnecessary. Marc-Jean Colte, who was a Quebec Liberal minister, a party fundraiser, and executive with the engineering firm Groupe Roche, along with former Quebec Liberal Party Premier Nathalie Normandin-Mondot, her chief of staff, a party Quebecist staffer, and a former Groupe Roche executive, faced charges from breach of trust, fraud, and corruption. I want to say ahead of time, I apologize for butchering French. I am violently American. The Crown alleges that in return for illegal campaign contributions, engineering contracts were granted. Lawyers for Cote called on the Quebec court hearing that the case against him and his co-accused in order Denis to testify. They want Denis to name the sources of her reports, while Cote's lawyers were based on police sources at the highest level of Quebec's UPAC, a permanent anti-corruption squad. Judge André Parrot, the presiding Quebec court judge, ruled against Cote's request that Denis be forced to testify. An appeal by Cote to the Quebec Superior Court was successful, with presiding Judge François Edmond ruling that Denis did not have to reveal the name of her sources. The Quebec Court of Appeal determined that it was not proper for the court to review the Superior Court decision, and Denis appealed to the Supreme Court, which heard the case last Monday. The case marks the first time the Supreme Court has been asked to rule on Bill 7S-231, a law proposed in the Senate in 2017 that also won unanimous approval in the House of Commons. The bill reverses the burden of proof for disclosure in court of journalist sources from the common law interpretation that the journalists had to convince the court that their sources must remain confidential. The change means that the party contesting the protection of unnamed sources must make the case that the sources should be revealed in the name of justice. Lawyers for Cote argue that the high-ranking Quebec officials gave journalists an important quantity of confidential information recurring to leaks to Denis and other journalists. The argument was meant to trigger application of another Supreme Court ruling in the 2014 R.V. Babos case, where Crown misconduct led to an acquittal. In this case, noted Chief Justice Wagner, the Quebec prosecutor, assured the Supreme Court and lower courts that the sources of leaks were not high-ranking officers, but rogue police officers. However, Quebec's Bureau d'Enquête Independence, my apologies, I'm butchering that French, similar to Ontario's Special Investigations Unit, which reviews police activities, is still investigating the UPAC leaks. Intervening last May, in the Supreme Court hearing, prosecutor Richard Rollineau indicated that new information will change the facts about this case. The change in this position of the prosecutor is serious enough to justify the intervention of the Supreme Court, but it is an obstacle to an examination on appeal of the Superior Court's decision, Wagner wrote, explaining his decision to send the question back to the Quebec court. Wagner also noted that the Supreme Court's Jordan ruling set a time limit on court cases. This dissenting judge in the case was Justice Rosalie Abella, who ruled that the new law protecting journalists' sources has historic value. Abella did rule on Superior Court decision that Dennis should testify, saying Justice Edmond made errors in fundamental law in his interpretation of the law, and proposing that Dennis should not be required to testify without returning the case to Quebec. Dennis applauded the Supreme Court decision as an affirmation of journalists' right to protect their sources. "We won't go back," she said in a Radio Canada interview. In a nutshell, Canada is pretty good on the press freedom aspect of things.